We're still on a crash course to the end of the world, and Season 1 of our Circular Economy podcast didn't fix it. So here we are with the Tech for Good Live Circular Economy podcast Season 2. Will we still be recording this when the tidal waves hit? How many seasons in will we be then? 234 or maybe just 10? Who knows? I'm Bex and Tom Passmore from Dsposal is here, and this time we're focusing more on the economy part, which is great because everyone likes money, and that's what the economy is about, right? This podcast is a 3-part series called Tech for Good Live and the Circular Economy Season 2, which strangely enough is a follow-on from Tech for Good Live and the Circular Economy Season 1, which you should go and listen to. We'll be delving further into the depths of the alternative to a traditional linear economy, and we'll be finding out whether it could save us all or if we're still doomed. So we're doing another season about the circular economy. Why is this relevant to a startup in the waste industry, if you could remind everyone?
Oh, good question. So at Dsposal, we have a vision where there's a world where waste is treated like a valuable resource. So being a tech company, we build software and digital tools to help people do the right thing with their waste, trying to make the whole thing easier and more transparent. The circular economy is very much about seeing all waste as resources, so that's why we're here.
So this is Season 2?
Yeah, so been spending the last, 9-10 months talking to people about the circular economy because we didn't cover everything in the first series.
Which is natural.
Yes, it's a big topic. We only had an hour and a half to cover across our 3 episodes. So yeah, we didn't hit everything.
What sorts of things did we miss that we're going to talk about in the next 3 episodes?
So the first thing we kind of missed was this idea of the biocycle. So we talked a lot about the technical cycle, but we never really touched on the biocycle, which is another part of the butterfly diagram we talked about in the first series. And we didn't at all talk about economy.
Just so about the nice circularity of it all.
We need to have a chat about economics, which, fun.
Well, I'm excited.
Me too.
Would you recommend that people can just start here, or do they need to go back and listen to the first season?
You definitely need to listen to the first series. You just cannot. You'll get lost really quickly because there's just jargon. So here's an example.
Well, Harari, the Yuval Harari, the great social commentator and writer, he wrote *Sapiens* and *Homo Deus* and things like that. He says that society moves forward on a story, a narrative about the future, about how things will be better. And if you like, we've had a couple of these stories, and we're trying to write the new one. And it will probably be, let's be positive for the minute, it'll have something to do with circularity in it. It will have something to do with taking insights from living systems. It will have something to do with being effective, not just efficient. And it will be to do with setting the rules of the game, which enable, as feedback runs through the system, things to improve. But we don't know quite what that story is. We just know that it's out there to be discussed and created.
So that kind of highlights there's a lot of jargon that went into what Ken was saying there. So that was a guy called Ken Webster. I'll let him introduce himself.
Yeah, my name's Ken Webster. I've been involved in the circular economy for about 10 years now. I'm working at the University of Exeter principally, but I'm involved in universities in Sweden and elsewhere. My specialism, I suppose, is economics and the circular economy.
So yeah, it felt like the right person to talk to about economics.
And we talked to him last time as well, didn't we, in the previous series?
We did talk to Ken in the first series, so there's kind of that link. Everyone else is new, apart from Ken, and us too, obviously. But yeah, before we get into the economics, I think we need to touch on that biocycle stuff. So if you remember from the first series, we talked about the left and the right wing of the Ellen MacArthur butterfly diagram. So biocycle is that left wing. So it's all to do about nutrient flows around food and about resources in that respect. So I'll pass you over to a guy called Mark.
Yeah, I'm Marc Zornes, one of the founders of Winnow. I've been in the food business my entire life, worked for a big food wholesaler in the US, got involved into sustainability by working for the US Green Building Council after that, and really kind of got inspired to do work in sustainability by the work that McKinsey and Company was doing. So then sort of set my mind to go work for McKinsey and join their London office, which was one of the offices where a number of people who were doing work in sustainability were based. Worked from there for about 3.5 years, working in a combination of their businesses that touched food, as well as in their sustainability practice in the McKinsey Global Institute. And it was from the work that I was doing at the McKinsey Global Institute that was really an inspiration for founding Winnow.
Yeah, so Mark was this really interesting guy from this company called Winnow. So one of the problems we had in the first series to talk about the Biocycle is that it's really hard to find people on that side of the wing, because it's a very kind of niche area, because it's all about food, it's all about resources, it's all about looping through and getting natural kinds of nutrients out of it. So yeah, this is what Winnow do.
So Winnow is a technology company that provides tools for kitchens to be able to understand and then prevent food waste. The basic problem that we find is that kitchens throw away up to 20% of what they buy, with a large majority of that actually happening before it even gets onto a customer's plate. And so Winnow is a technology to, first of all, measure what's being wasted. We provide a technology that uses artificial intelligence to capture photos of what it is that's being thrown away, called Winnow Vision. We then weigh that food and put cost data on that. We then take those analytics and feed it back into the culinary teams, and that data tends to drive a pretty significant reduction in food waste. On average, we can cut food waste by about 50% by value. And the result of that is our customers save anywhere between 3% to 8% of what they spend on food, while doing the right thing and making their kitchen more environmentally friendly at the same time by reducing wastage.
That's amazing. I love what Winnow are doing. Like, all of the big technologies, got AI in there actually doing some good for a change, and data analytics, brilliant.
Yeah, that ticks a lot of boxes for me. Like, they seem to have found a problem that Mark knows exists. That problem exists, and it's gone, right, how do we solve it? And what tools are out there to be able to solve this problem? Like, it's not something I've ever been aware of. I've always assumed that actually restaurants would be really kind of savvy with their food, because that is their bottom line. If they're throwing it away, then it means they're not getting any profit from it. Therefore, from what Mark was saying, it's just not the case. I had to ask Mark actually how they do fit into the circular economy, because I don't think it's instantly obvious.
First of all, let's recognize that sort of one of the biggest challenges that exists around waste is that there's very poor data on exactly what is wasted, why it happens, where it occurs. And like most problems, if you're really going to make a meaningful impact on it, you've got to really understand the problem well. And food waste is no exception to that. There's data that says that about a third of all food is wasted from farm to fork. A good portion of that will happen in sort of consumer-facing businesses, which would be restaurants. And what Winnow does is we provide the data platform to understand why that waste is happening, as well as the analytic tools to understand what can be done to make use of food that otherwise would have been wasted by perhaps repurposing it in the kitchen, or just actually optimizing production so that waste doesn't happen in the first place, to be able to prevent that. Beyond that, what we do is when there is leftover food, we do have partnerships with food banks. For example, in Australia, we work with Oz Harvest, and there's a real win-win where we will go into a kitchen, minimize the amount of food that's being thrown away, but there's still going to be some food that's being wasted, and any of that is still fit for human consumption can then be donated to go to people who are in need. And kind of the way to think about food waste is to first think about preventing food waste, then think about ensuring that food basically is feeding people, if not feeding animals, and only then really thinking about recycling it. And Winnow is really working kind of at that top tier of creating the circular economy, sort of, avoiding the waste by design in the first place, and then ensuring that if the waste or sort of the food is produced in excess of demand, that there are outlets of that are consumption as opposed to disposal.
They've thought about everything.
Yeah, well, it certainly seems like it. I mean, they've been around for a few years, but no, they seem to be making a lot of really good progress. They seem to be like connecting a lot of dots and seem to be helping a lot of like organizations really understand how they kind of contribute to this problem of food waste, which again, I don't think is like you see a little bit of food going in the bin and you can't really figure out how much that is over like a week, a month, a year. But no, it soon mounts up.
Yeah, it's interesting as well how they brought food banks into the mix, because something I would worry about is with working with food banks and other organisations that take in that kind of waste food often, and that seems to have been talked about a lot lately. You see supermarkets donating stuff to food banks more than you used to, where everyone would just say, "Oh, they chucked it away."
Yeah.
Now there's they're taking them to food banks, which is a great thing. But if you're actually reducing the amount of waste, does that mean there's a reduction in the amount of things going to a food bank? But maybe not if actually more people are taking things to food banks.
Yeah, and I think this is what Mark was saying when I was talking to him. Like, actually, like if you are really engaging with this problem around food waste, and you keep cascading it up to like, don't throw it away, make sure it gets into like an animal's stomach, or better than that is getting it into a human stomach. Better than that is to actually not oversupply. Because one of the, like, and this is an amazing stat that Mark brought up that I've never heard before, but it's just, it is absolutely insane.
It's been sort of validated by a number of people, which is about $1 trillion a year of food that's thrown away. In fact, the latest estimates from the Boston Consulting Group suggest that it's about 1.2 trillion, growing to $1.5 trillion a year by 2030. And there's not really a lot of investment going in thinking about how you prevent that waste from occurring. It just screams that there's a big opportunity to do something there. And it was pretty much a conclusion that I had, that dealing with food waste was going to have to be almost an industry of its own, and was going to drive a lot of innovation, and had the opportunity to be in a position to have some foresight that would occur. Quit McKinsey and decided to build a business that was solving the problem.
$1 trillion. $1 trillion.
That's a lot.
It's one of those numbers, like, I can't imagine, actually. Like, it's like when you talk about billionaires, like, oh, they've got loads of money. Like, how much bigger is $1 trillion than $1 billion? I don't know. Like, huge amount of food waste, around the world. There's people starving, and we're just throwing away food at that massive rate a year.
And what I find fascinating about that is that's costing someone money. So why are they wasting money? And I like that the solution that Winnow has come up with is going to save people money as well. So we'll make people use it more. I hope.
No, definitely. And I think that's where it comes in with this idea of the circular economy. Like, it's not just about making flows easier or leaky loops or whatever. It comes down to that core idea of about money, because then that does enact change. Because if people can get more money back, they have more money in their back pocket, then that's really good. Because I was saying to Mark as well, like this is fantastic. Like, I love the fact what we know have been doing. Like, when are you going to be moving into a household? Because householders like produce so much more food waste than the hospitality industry.
I would first, challenge the assumption that households make a lot more waste than hospitality. In certain markets, that may be the case. There was an interesting study coming out of the U.S. by a group called Refed that highlighted the share of food waste that occurred across the United States. And they said that about 15% of all food waste that happened in the United States came from farms. About 5% was lost somewhere in distribution in the supply chain. And about 40% came from consumer-facing businesses, which is basically hospitality and supermarkets. And then another 40% came from households. So we do see consumer-facing businesses as a real opportunity in sort of dealing with food waste. The reason we like big businesses that are having food waste issues that we can help them solve is, arguably there's more money to be saved per location than, say, your average household. And that makes, as we are still a relatively early stage technology business, it makes it easier for us to get the economics to stack up and really create a compelling business case. The homes issue is a really interesting one. We have put Winnow into homes on a sort of short trial with Sainsbury's, and we demonstrated that when Winnow was put into homes, we actually cut food waste by about 70% by value. And we really do see an opportunity there. But today Winnow is really squarely focused on solving the issue in the hospitality and sort of consumer-facing business world, mostly because it's where we have a long track record of success. It's where we have a sort of broad set of clients that we are optimizing our product to service for. And we're looking at sort of other opportunities in the supply chain, down the road.
I'm always speechless about that kind of, like, so we're wasting like $1 trillion a year of food more, and then like we know a technology solution can like improve that.
I would love to see that in action.
Well, yeah, like a massive
People
change.
love data, right?
No, definitely. I mean, being able to like access that and see that and be like, oh, I need to like, how much money would you save if you're reducing that amount of food waste? So we were talking about this for a while, and it was one of the questions I asked quite frequently in the first series about this idea of if the circular economy comes into its own, what happens to the waste industry, right? You're talking about like $1 trillion worth of food annually being wasted. That means there's a lot of value going to the waste industry that they're just going to miss out on if Winnow really disrupts that market. So even though that was more of a last series stuff, I've really had to ask him that question.
I mean, industries, when you go through any sort of disruption, kind of need to rethink, the economic model. Our perspective is that, just to give you kind of a sort of simple mental exercise, take a bin, a 240-liter bin. It probably costs 5 to 10 pounds to get that bin taken away. It probably costs 100 to 200 pounds to fill that bin with food. And so what should you really be focusing on providing the service for? Obviously, you need that food taken away if you are going to dispose of it because you have hygiene issues and you want that to be efficient. But the opportunity of preventing that food from occurring in the first place is 10x that of what's currently being captured solely by just collecting that food and sort of putting it elsewhere. And so, I think that the industry is going to need more data to better understand what's being wasted. That data is then going to need to go in to feed into what I would say is both sort of industrial strategy, how businesses look at what they're wasting and how they can prevent things from being wasted or find ways to design it out in the first place. And that's the circular economy thinking. But I think also policy, right? I mean, landfills are filling up. China doesn't want anyone's plastic anymore, and neither do any other countries. And so I think we're going to have to start reversing what has been a steady course of just allowing waste to be this sort of unseen problem that grows as our economy grows, and be more efficient from design out. And we think that the data that we can provide into that is a key enabler to make that happen.
I know we were bound to talk about money in this episode a lot because it was going to focus more on economics. And we did point this out in the previous season as well. But isn't it horrible that we have to make a business case for this sort of stuff anyway? Just going to say it, just so it's said.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's one of the things I've been thinking about a lot recently is like when you're talking about these amounts of money that are slushing around the system and you talk about like the billionaires that are out there, like the amount of money that we have as a planet, like actually, why the hell do we need to make any more? Like, as in that, haven't we got to a point where actually we can level that playing field so that actually money isn't that barrier that it once was? Like, oh, I want to do this, but I haven't got the money to do it, therefore it won't get done, even though it's brilliant. Brilliant things might not make money, but they still should exist. And I think that we've lost that, and I think it's really sad. I think it's really sad that it's just like, yeah, it's all like everything's coming back to money, even though we're in this climate emergency. And it's just like, oh yeah, but is it going to make money? Oh yeah, I mean, that's a good point. Is it better to have a climate or have money? Oh, I don't know. There is a balance there. No. Sorry, I had a bit of a rant.
But it's worth getting out there. On the flip side, though, we do need to consider money. So I think Winnow's done a really good job there to incorporate the costings of things into everything. And it does make economical sense. It's not just there for the warm fuzzies that I would like it to be there for.
No, true. And like the other thing that I think Winnow is kind of bringing to the table, which is really, really interesting, is these data insights. So they're collecting this data from like kind of all the way around the world, being able to like slice it and dice it in different ways. And then like they're anonymizing that and releasing it to organizations that would benefit from it. And like Mark was saying there, it's kind of around policy. So we talked about that for a bit as well.
If you kind of think about Winnow, it's a tool to, at a really granular level, understand exactly what's being wasted. And then it's a set of tools on top of that data of understanding what's being wasted that can be used to minimize that waste. Today it's food. and we care about it because the food system is very near and dear to our heart. But there's no reason why it couldn't have other applications as well. We're having conversations with a bunch of people in the industry who are excited about what we do. I think the way that we interact with groups like RAP, also groups that are really promoting the issue of food waste, like the World Resources Institute, is we help to anonymously provide some data around sort of what's being wasted and why, and that helps to lead better information and insight for the industry to understand both the scope of the opportunity, but also of the potential. When you talk about companies that are involved in waste collection, I think there is an appetite for those companies to better understand sort of why things are being wasted, as opposed to just being responsible for picking that up and disposing of it. And so there's a real value add there that's clear. We want to have a broad dialogue with the industry, because fundamentally we want to transform this issue of food waste, and we have no belief that we're going to do it alone. We're going to have to do it as a group of players really trying to make wholesale change.
Winnow are doing some really interesting stuff, and I think they're leading in that field. And then with that data analytics that they're able to apply, they're able to help those different things. So he mentioned their RAP, so RAPA, or the Waste and Resources Action Programme. Like, they're a UK-based charity that works with businesses and individuals, communities, and that to kind of achieve the circular economy, and really looking at waste as part of that. Like, it was really interesting to talk to Mark. Like, I think they are doing some really fascinating things, and I love waste and I love data, so it kind of like was a perfect person to talk to, because again, I don't know anything about that side of the nutrient cycle on that side of the biocycle, so it was just like 45 minutes of learning with Mark, which is brilliant.
I think it would be interesting to see what we can learn from them from the perspective of they're clearly going to be a profitable business with the ability to sell this into the restaurant industry and whoever else they're going to sell it into. So they're going to operate as a commercial business. But clearly, the whole point of what they're doing is the social good implications around that. So they are nice people, right? We'd assume.
Yeah.
And doing stuff around collaboration, all of the other organisations that they mentioned there, they are sharing information with them. So I think collaboration is really nice to see in this industry, especially when everyone's trying to make money out of it as well.
Yeah, and I think that is a key component of the circular economy, is these kind of collaborations, because you don't know everything and you don't have access to everyone else's suppliers. Like, you just have to work with them. You have to create partnerships. You have to create collaborations to access these things. And I think being able to do that, like, so last series we looked at the technical cycle, and then this, like, we've just had a look at the biocycle. Like, it's just like, okay, that's really neat. That's really cool. I get it now. I can view that, and I can understand how there's businesses looking at these things. But then I think now we have to get into that wonderful world of economics. So I know nothing about economics.
Snap.
So we went and talked to Ken. So I introduced Ken earlier. He likes to talk in metaphors and frameworks, because the circular economy is a framework like the economy. Let's just dive in with Ken.
Well, all frameworks relate to metaphors. That's what George Lakoff tells us. We understand abstract thinking by using metaphors. And in the era of machines and clockwork and determinism, we thought of the world worked like a clockwork, like some sort of machine, that with its parts and everything was determined and hierarchical, and there was inputs and outputs, and there was a rigidity to it. Now we're beginning to go back to the idea, well, no, actually, it's not a plumbing pipe work as it used to be thought of in the economy. There was a model, I think, in one of the universities in London of the economy as a central heating system, with valves and pipes and all the rest of it. We're beginning to see it much more as an ecological system, or one where you've got biology. Biology and how an organism fits its ecology. It's about fitting, and it's about things like evolution and continual iteration and feedback. And it's not fixed. And they're not winners and losers. It's whether the whole thing works. As Nick Hanauer says, we're all better off when we're all better off. And it's part of that shift of how you see the world working. And that's why there's such a tension between quite a number of economists who still have this idea everything is in long run equilibrium. It's a sort of machine analogy. And those see it as a complex adaptive system, and it's much more subtle, much more dynamic. And that's part of that characterization. It's now for some people, they just go circular economy. It's a nice toolkit. I can do something with these materials. Have a nice day. That's fair enough. Go and do it. But my view has always been, for nearly all of the years I've worked in this, that no, the powerful thing is that thinking behind it, which is a shift to looking at systems.
So something really interesting. So do you remember when we did the Blue Dot Festival and Harry talked to someone about the like automatons, and that's how we think, how the brain worked? I love the fact that we're moving towards this idea of like, oh, like we had complete dominion over everything. So we created clockwork machines. Therefore, this is how brains must work, or this is how the economics of a society must work. And then as we've gone on, done some more research, that didn't fit anymore. So we were like, oh, it must be more on this instead. And now we're getting to the point where it's just like, we don't really understand. It's a living system in its own right. And it has these different, like, and it flows, and it has these different, it grows and changes, and we don't actually control it in any way. And I love that idea. And I love the fact that when I was talking to Ken about this, I was just thinking, oh, Harry talked to that guy at Blue Dot. That's amazing. So yeah, like economics is mind blowing. Like I don't get it. I still don't. Even after like months of talking to people about it, it's completely this manufactured thing. We've created it, and we're like, yeah, release it. Oh, market forces and balance and equilibrium and free market and stuff like that. And it's just like, oh no, we made all this up.
Yeah, and I feel like sometimes people talk about it though in that way, like, you don't know about this, so don't worry about it.
Yeah.
We'll sort it out. You can't change it. It is what it is. And because it is so complicated, you agree to that. You're like, okay, yes, you're the boss. And I guess I'm from a search engine optimization background. Sorry, very long time ago. But that was seen as that sort of thing where it's shrouded in mystery. Like, don't worry about it. We'll sort it out.
Yeah.
You don't need to think about it. It's just magic. We're all gurus and magicians and ninjas. So, and I feel like economics is a bit like that. You don't understand about it, so don't worry about it. And is that true? Can it be changed?
Yeah, I mean, so this is what I think Ken really tries to do with his metaphor. So he has a really, really nice metaphor of how economics should flow and in these idea of living systems. So I'll get Ken to explain that to you.
What's behind the circular economy is a way of thinking about, it's not new, but it's a framework for thinking, which is orientated towards the world not as a machine, but the world as, if you like, it draws ideas from biology and ecology. It's about maintaining capital stocks, and those are not just machines and whatever. That includes human capital, the physical capital, the forests, the fisheries, and all the rest of it. It's maintaining capital and getting meaningful flows from that. And people are satisfied with that because the world does. They think the world works in quite a circular way anyway. Of course it does. But it reaches, this is the analogy with the living systems, it reaches the periphery. It's not about, in the bloodstream terms, the arteries and the veins and the heart. That's one bit. That's what people have got, I think, annoyed about, is that they're not talking about the rest of it. The periphery, there's more capillaries, kilometers and kilometers of capillaries in human bodies. And the blood system as a whole, like the economy as a whole, has to reach the periphery or bad things happen. And that's, I think, quite comforting. It's about effective systems, not just efficient ones. We've been sold the story of the economy as an efficient machine, and that if you didn't fit the efficient machine, you were a loser. But if the economy is more like a healthy body, where money in this case is blood, blood and money, if that reaches the periphery and enables all of it to thrive, what's not to like? That is a much more satisfactory way of approaching it, in my view, and it starts with a changed metaphor. Because we're all struggling at the moment to think, what is the new economic story? And I think circular economy's main benefit is very practical as well, but the main benefit is to encourage the thinking to be more, frankly, circular. And, that's entirely back to people like Adam Smith, I may have mentioned. Adam Smith talked about the great circulation. For him, the idea was to get the landlord out of the mix. It's just the same as today. The problem is unearned income. All of the people who own large asset classes are not improving the overall effectiveness of that system. They're more extractive. And it's almost like we're revisiting not only Adam Smith, but the Gilded Age in America at the late end of the 19th century, where there was also extreme inequality. And what needed to happen is that circulation has to work better in the money flows and with the materials, and particularly now with the climate emergency, looking at energy cascades, how that works in the system. So it's at the beginning for me of a different way of thinking about the economy, and the economy as information, materials, and energy, not just one bit. So it's time to put some big trousers on and look at the big picture. And that is what I think people need to do, rather than worry too much about the little details. I think you mentioned one time about, say, particular flows like aluminium or whatever. That's interesting, but the more important thing is the framework for the thinking behind what you do with a particular product, component, or material.
So Ken's really kind of coming into this idea of economics, and it's like, I like the living system analogy, like the body analogy, like blood flows through the system, it goes through all the different organs, has to go through the capillaries. So, standard people probably get to the peripheries, like keep it fed, watered, provide it with oxygen, everything it needs, and then go back to get replenished. And I like that idea.
I like the idea that it's all important, even all the way down to the tiniest little capillary.
Yeah, the tiniest cell on your small toe is like miles away from like your brain and your heart and your lungs. But you know what? If that starts dying, you've got necrosis of your toe, necrosis of your foot, of your ankle, of your calf, of your knee, all the way up. And actually, before long, you're in trouble. You're in a lot of trouble very, very, very quickly without intervention. Like I said before, I don't know anything about the economics. So a quick question for you, Bex.
Yes.
What do banks do?
What do banks do?
What do banks do?
So they take people's money and then give it to other people. Right?
Yeah, I mean, so I always thought banks take in money, they save it, they do some magic with it, they give it to other people, they get interest off it, and away we go.
Oh dear. In your own head, you think, well, no, that's not what they do. They create money out of nothing, effectively. They create assets and liabilities at the same time, and it's based on their belief of whether you can pay it back or whether you've got collateral. There's nothing about swapping it from savers' accounts to you. So when you've got that level of general misunderstanding about how the economy works, it's very hard to get to a sensible discussion in a reasonable time. And that's why I usually just focus on the question, where is money created and what is it created for?
So yeah, I didn't know what banks do at all. I'm like 34. I feel like I've used banks for the last, I can't do the maths. That's how bad I am with money. I can't do maths quickly in my head. 15 years, let's say, definitely longer than that. And I don't know what they do. And this idea of unearned wealth, just this new concept to me, kind of talking to Ken about it. It's this idea of you go to bed, you wake up and you're richer. You've done nothing. All you've done is sleep. Why should you become richer? Yeah, I don't know. And it was bonkers, really. Bonkers kind of talk, thinking about it in this different way, because then it is just if you start layering that on top of a living system, the idea of the body, and the body doesn't do anything like that. The body doesn't just acquire assets constantly. That's a failing somewhere, surely, in the system of economics. So yeah, it's quite interesting, talking to Ken about it.
I love Ken. I loved earlier he said, just put your big pants on, start thinking about the entire system.
yeah, but it's hard to do. And I fell into this exact same trap. Again, when we were talking, I was just it feels exactly what people do with the circular economy. And exactly what we did in the first series. We talk about material flows, recycling. It's not just recycling on steroids. It's a little bit more than that. We never actually properly engage. And actually just talking about loops and flows and nutrients and stuff like that. I asked Ken if that was a problem.
I think one of the big dangers of just sticking with that is that if we are talking about an economy with a big capital E, it's Kenneth Boulding says it involves knowledge and information, materials and energy. And just trying to talk about the materials and energy and ignoring the the key role of knowledge and information, and money as a form of information, seems pretty strange. And you can even do it to the level of one of these very simple diagrams about the economy. You see it in the butterfly diagram in a sense. The assumption is there are households on one side who provide labor and buy the products, and there are businesses on the other side that employ labor and create profits and make the stuff. That's an economy of barter, really, with a layer of money on it. So it's an exchange economy about real things. Now, we happily talk about that and ignore one of the two big other elements in this, says Michael Hudson, which is the financial economy sitting there, the fire insurance and real estate element of it, and of course, who owns the resources, the land, the commons, the forest, the fisheries, and all the rest of it. It's almost as though we were just talking about an economy of exchange and materials and energy most of the time, when that's not useful if you're trying to say how can a circular economy help improve overall well-being.
I like that you brought in well-being into the mix.
Yeah. Again, I think it's a core component of the circular economy, is to make sure that people are looked after, people are cared for, and it's about wellness. It's about making sure that everybody that's in the system is cared for and looked after. And I think that just doesn't really happen, unfortunately, in the current economy that we've got. I mean, the peripheries are just left to rot and die in a dark sense of the word. But yeah, no, unfortunately, I think that does happen. And well-being is so key and so important to, our well-being. And I think we're missing out at the moment with the way our economy works, how you do have these people that just end up with vast amounts of money to be able to do whatever they want with. And then you've got other people just basically thrown to the curb. You see it walking around Manchester all the time, people that are in crisis and living on the streets. And it's just why are they billionaires? Why are the people that go to sleep at night and create more wealth? And then you've got other people that go to sleep at night and all they're going to do is get wet and cold. And then they wake up and rinse and repeat. The core component around well-being is not there at the moment, and it's not fair. I don't know, that sounds like a really childish thing to say, it's not fair, but it just isn't. There's no spin on it. So, yeah, I mean, I think this is why people don't talk about economics. Because you get into these conversations.
But the way that Ken is talking about economics so far, he's changing the way that it's being talked about with this system that's like a body
yes.
instead of a machine, which is a new way of talking about economics. Are other people talking about it in that way? It's not just Ken, right?
So Ken brought it up that it's been thought about that a long time now.
The flexible idea of a circular economy is that it's a toolkit. Now, toolkit about, if you like, slowing the flow of resources, closing the loops, getting higher utilization, shifting from products to services. It's a mix of business opportunities there to make better use of material flows and energy. That's good, but you can use that to make things worse by, say, increasing the power of those who control the networks, so that you have to pay to access almost everything. Because you wouldn't own it yourself. That could happen. You might save resources. You might go, hooray, we've saved resources, but you've made the who controls what question actually worse. And it could go the other way, which is, it helps really encourage a lot of very small or medium-sized operators to take advantage of these cascades of materials and products and offering services and using platforms to exchange, a bit like your own, which could add to well-being by adding to the ability of people to help meet their own needs and to satisfy local markets and local human needs more widely. It all depends, as they always say, on the rules of the game. What are you playing it for? If you're in a world where assets matter most and the value of assets, circular economy is great because you just help to dive into controlling more material assets. And that earns what they say in economics is economic rents. It's unearned income because you control it. It was on the news today about prices for dropping people off at an airport. And that's a classic example of an economic rent. It's an unearned income. What can people do? If you want to drop somebody off at the airport, you've got to get close to it, and they will charge you for using that space for a few minutes. And this is This is not something I think most people would think of as improving well-being. It's about, my old phrase is that the circular economy needs to be regenerative, accessible, and abundant. And that's the real test. You see, economics is not neutral. Economics is there to answer those three questions. What do we produce? How do we produce it? And who gets the benefit? And they're always around questions of power and influence and control.
What we're saying here, basically, is the same as what we talk about in tech a lot, that the circular economy doesn't inherently mean everything's going to be perfect and well-being is thought of naturally as part of the system. It's who's using it that matters.
Yeah, and that's what I was thinking as well. Like, it's like, yeah, who produces what? Like, the circular economy isn't good or bad. Like, it is neither. And I know Ken says that the economy isn't neutral, but the circular economy is neutral at the moment because we're not fully investing in it. We're not fully using it and utilizing it. So at the moment, it's a benign kind of framework. It's just how do people use it? And this is where I think it becomes really interesting because, again, if you just think about material flows, it's all very nicey. But now it's just like, actually, if you start talking about power and influence and money, billionaires losing trillions of pounds of food waste a year, kind of stuff like that. It's like, the circular economy could send us the wrong way if it's just around owning massive asset classes forever.
Oh, and here was me thinking it was going to fix everything and naturally just weed out the bad actors, but it's not. It does depend who are the actors.
Yeah, and I think it's wonderful. With Tech for Good Live, we do talk about this kind of this idea of kind of intent and agile and intentions, let them known, because then everyone knows where you're going and what you're doing. And I was never expecting to be talking about economics in that way. But yeah, Ken brought it up and it was really interesting to listen to.
Well, there's something of that in there, and it's all about these open iterative systems, which have got a degree of stability, but they're not determined. And yes, it's all about intention. And that's why Bill McDonough and that said it's regenerative and restorative by design and intention. It's not only do we design it, but that's what we intend to happen. And he says design is the first sign of human intention anyway. What did we really want? Is that what we really wanted? A bunch of dead trees and poisoned atmosphere? Was that the plan? If that wasn't the plan, what is the plan? And simplistic in a way, but I enjoy that sort of being brought up short by just saying what we have now is not an accident. Somebody made some decisions.
But doesn't that go back to unintended consequences? As he said, I don't think anybody set out to kill a load of trees, but they just ignored the fact that it definitely would kill a load of trees.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing. Someone made a decision hundreds of years ago to go A or B. That was fine at the time. And then on our kind of if this then that statements on the way down, we've got to a point where our oceans are full of plastic, we're in a climate crisis, and there's loads of dead trees. And it's just there was no intent there to do that. But
there was an intent not to do it.
Yeah, that's the thing. No one sat down and said we want to rip all of the resources out of the planet to create loads and loads of pointless wealth. But actually, this is where we've got to. And no one said no. Mm. No one kind of said, stop. Do you know what you're doing? Stop it. So there was no intent, and that was probably worse. We're just ripping ourselves through this planet. Yay, economics.
It's got dark.
Yeah, a little bit. So I talked to Ken about it and try to understand economics a little bit more and how the circular economy can either be good or bad for the future well-being of everyone. So I wanted to talk to some other people about it who are kind of bringing their areas like Scotland and London, why they're pushing towards a circular economy. Is it just all sweetness and light, or is it kind of
lies?
Is it all lies? Is it just buzzwords? So I talked to a guy called Iain, lovely Scottish Iain. So this is introduction. Just so you're aware, sound quality on this isn't great, so I do apologise for that.
Hi, I'm Iain Gulland. I'm the Chief Executive of Zero Waste Scotland. So Zero Waste Scotland is basically Scotland's circular economy expert agency. We are fully funded by the Scottish Government to really accelerate the circular economy here in Scotland, sort of helping not just consumers, but more importantly businesses, to think differently about how they use products and resources more responsibly in a more circular fashion. So that's the primary function. We also still provide support to local authorities and recycling services and businesses on sort of wider resource efficiency measures, including energy efficiency as well. So we have a broad remit here in Scotland, but we're kind of part of the kind of Scottish government landscape.
Yeah, so I talked to Iain for quite a long time on a very bad phone line. So I do apologise about that, because it can be a bit hard to hear. But it was interesting, his take on why Scotland's going down the circular economy route.
I mean, that's quite interesting. I mean, it kind of started, obviously, a few years ago when we were starting to look at, opportunities, I guess, in terms of waste management and more sustainable use of resources. We tapped into the kind of idea of the circular economy and realised that, we were obviously increasing recycling rates significantly here in Scotland, both from household and businesses, but the vast majority, over 75% of the material we were collecting for recycling was being exported out of Scotland. And our analysis at that time suggested that for every one job there was in the collection of materials for recycling, there's a further 8 jobs in the reprocessing, remanufacturing, resupply of those materials back into the economy. So it became a kind of economic opportunity for us to kind of really think about how do we make more use of the waste materials or the resources coming through our economy, but also I think we actually start to think differently about the system. So it wasn't just by luck that we had these materials. We were actually designing the way that the materials were being used. So we did a lot of research. We did some analysis of key sectors, food and drink, manufacturing, oil and gas even, and tried to understand what that would look like from an economic opportunity if we changed the way that the materials were used. And that started to add up some big numbers in terms of millions of pounds, hundreds of millions of pounds. In food and drink, there's about 500 to 800 million pounds of opportunity. Manufacturing was about the same, 500 million pounds. Obviously, there was a potential increase in the quality of jobs, and certainly the number of jobs and the quality of jobs that could be realised through different tactics. So all of that kind of came to a point where the Scottish Government really started to think, this is not just an environmental story here, this is an economic opportunity, and they started to think about strategy. So they developed a strategy in 2016 which really set out the ambition that we had here in Scotland. So it's been woven into not just the environmental policy area, but and obviously more recently into the climate change policy area, but also into the economic strategy for Scotland, the manufacturing strategy for Scotland, the skills development strategy for Scotland. So it's becoming a bit more woven into the fabric of where we want Scotland to go as a successful nation.
Yeah, I find it really interesting there that Iain really focuses on jobs and really focuses on like Scotland's ambition. And it's just like, I can see it. Like, that's really exciting. We talked a lot more, and again, I won't play a lot of Iain stuff just because the sound quality is a little bit lower. But when you talk to Iain, it is just like, yes, this is really good for the people of Scotland. This is really good for Scotland. This is really exciting. And then I was invited to talk to James as well.
I'm James Close. I'm the head of the Low Carbon Circular Economy Programme for London, and I work for LWARB, which is the London Waste and Recycling Board. And prior to joining LWARB, I was the Director for Climate Change at the World Bank based in Washington, D.C., where we were encouraging client countries to put climate change at the top of their development objectives, and we managed to double the share of our lending towards climate change. I run the Circular Economy Programme, and that has a couple of strands. The first strand is the Advanced London programme, where we are working with small, medium-sized enterprises who are committed to driving their businesses through circular economy principles. We've got, I think, upward of 50 businesses in that programme, and then we also have an accelerator which includes another 8 businesses where we're really giving them some very specific support to help them access finance and scale up their business. We also work with other partners to help accelerate the principles of the circular economy through London, influencing the policy work through the GLA, but also working with the London boroughs to help them accelerate their circular economy approaches so that they can reduce their waste and increase their recycling.
Like talking to James is like a really different kind of feel to talking to Iain. Like, and again, it's this idea that circular economy is a framework. Like it's a toolkit to work in different ways and different operators. So again, I asked the same question to James about why are London going down this route?
We think it's good for business because businesses can be much more focused on what they're doing in terms of managing their resources, and they're also responding to consumer demand as consumers think more about their environmental footprint and how they can reduce it. And these new circular business models are the things that are going to drive the transition that we need to make to a low carbon economy which uses resources more efficiently, moving from a linear use of resources where you put the resource into the top and you throw it away at the end to a circular use of resources where you're able to reduce consumption but reuse it and recycle activities, and of course then repair as well, and you've just got a more efficient economy as a result of that, and that creates opportunities for business, but it also creates benefits for consumers. They're able to reduce their costs, and they also have access to different ways of doing things that are going to be much more effective for their households, and really quite exciting in terms of the use and deployment of technology, and also beneficial for the environment. And of course, in a city like London, that means that we can improve air quality, which gives people much healthier lifestyles. So there's a real multiple benefits coming to different types of people as a result of adopting circular economy principles. And I think the fact that London's at the forefront of all of this means that it can present itself internationally as a great place to do business. And that's going to attract inward investment, and that's going to help the London economy grow in the high value sectors that are really going to attract good and exciting new jobs. So we're creating this cluster really of circular economy businesses that are going to have a great attraction for investors, have significant benefits for consumers and citizens, and are also going to lower the costs of managing London's waste and managing it more effectively, so that not only does it get reduced, but waste gets recycled and used in more intelligent and more effective ways.
James has a really good CV. Can I just put out there what a cool background he has? I mean, Iain might do as well. I just didn't talk about it. But I like that, obviously, James knows how to talk about this to enthuse people about it. So he's talking about the positive effects that it can have on the economy, but also not forgetting the positive effects on the people living in London as well. And the emissions were mentioned. And Iain has obviously crunched all the data in Scotland and knows how that can benefit businesses. So they're both, I think it's really cool that there's people working on this and it's like paid for by the government.
No, definitely. And it's those different approaches as well. So like, yeah, James talks very much about like that ability to do business and that ability to like lower emissions and that ability to get investment. And then Iain's talking about the good of Scotland and the good of like getting improving jobs. And it's subtly different. But that's the idea of this framework. And that's what's really exciting. Like people can look at it in different angles and figure it out what works well for them in their location that works well with their populace. Because again, we're going to have to, like James was saying, like policy needs to change, which then gets, obviously that's politics. So you have to talk about it in different ways. And I think that's what's really exciting. That's when you know it's starting to get some momentum where people can look at the same thing, but be able to talk about it differently, to get different people on board and get different people engaged. And that's what's really exciting. And I think that's what allows people to talk about the circular economy. No one ever talks. When was the last time you talked about the economy? I've never talked about it. That's
Last
why
night, Tom, we were talking about it last
No,
night.
yeah, it's 6 hours. Just no, but like no one ever talks about it. And like again, I was talking to Iain about this, and I think this is my favourite quote of the whole series. So I'll just play it and then see if other people like it as much as I do.
It's an interesting time. I just think it's moving from. I mean, certainly what we've seen is that it's definitely moving from an environmental imperative, which I guess is where it started. It's about how do we make more of the materials and reduce the consumption, etc. I think we've seen that it's obviously now been framed in addressing climate change. Of course it is, but also that economic story. We've passed through that as well. People recognise that there's obviously a macro level billions of pounds worth of opportunity, but actually that whether you called it left leaning or not, it is tapping into something. I think there is a kind of idea of social value and well-being, that we're very keen on here. Scottish First Minister is very keen on this idea of well-being economy and measuring success, not just in GDP. I think, the circular economy plays into that. It's not just about money. It kind of feeds that more in whatever you want to call it, human nature thing about working together, working collaboratively, and doing something for the environment, doing something for the planet, doing something for your community, and making things better all round. And I think that's what. Yeah, I think that's where we're moving into. It feels like the next part of the rainbow, or whatever you want to call it, that we're moving through. Is we're picking up. So it's picking up another set of people who are really interested in the circular economy because it feeds that need, so to speak. So I think that's it's a great thing to talk about. I think because, as I said, people like to explore it and smile when they're doing it because it feels like a fun thing to do.
People smile when they talk about the circular economy because it's a fun thing to do. I love that. And it's so true. I mean, I'm smiling right now, but and they do, and you can see it. And that's what's so exciting. That's what is so exciting about the circular economy for me, and about the economics part of it. I started this we're going to have to ask economics-based questions. We've gone into living systems and blood flowing through the system and making sure that it's about well-being. And actually, that's what the economics should be about. That's what the economy should be about. It shouldn't be about money and who owns what, who produces what, why, who has the biggest paycheck. It should be about well-being and how it improves it. And I think Iain kind of really, as soon as he said it, I was like, oh my God, that's amazing. Because people do smile when they talk about the circular economy because it allows them to think in those ways and allows them to put themselves in a world where they can solve problems in their way and collaborate while doing it. And that's just great.
Next time on Tech for Good Live and the circular economy, we look at a real-life case study and look at aluminium and how it flows through the system. This podcast wouldn't exist without Tom Passmore and Sophie Walker from Dsposal. Music has been graciously provided by George Fell. Podcast.co make all of this possible thanks to the shiny podcast studio they provide. I've been, and will continue to be, Rebecca Rae-Evans. Thanks also to Paul Jakubowski and Jonny Rae-Evans from the Tech for Good Live team. If you're interested in learning more about the circular economy, then why not listen to the LWARB Circular Economy podcast?